Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Harry Rosenfeld. He is from Congregation Albert in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hello, Rabbi. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, it's nice to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Our Parsha is Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. And at the center of this Parsha, there is the wonderful story about the search for a bride, a spouse for Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham's emissary goes to a different country and finds Rebecca and brings her back to be the bride for Isaac. The parsha begins with this pasuk: "Vayu chayei Sarah 100 shana ו20 shana ו7 shanim shnei chayei Sarah." The pasuk counts the number of years that Sarah lived: 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. So Rabbi, this parsha is, its narrative is a contradiction. It begins with the death of a person, and it continues with some kind of a love story.
Two love stories, actually.
Right. So what do we make of that?
I've never really thought about it in that context. I think it's just a normal, natural telling of the progression of life, as most of the stories about people in the Tanakh are. People die, people get married, babies are born, life goes on. And I really see Chayei Sarah as the third part of the trilogy of Abraham's life, because directly or indirectly, it's still all focused on him and his good points and also his character flaws.
Okay, so where do we see the good points and what flaws do we see in this parsha?
So the good point is he's concerned about his son, the one he tried to kill, and was unsuccessful with, and according to the text, hasn't seen since that time. And now Sarah has died, and he's purchased this plot of land, this cave, in which to have a family burial plot. So, you can see he's concerned about having family that's going to continue. And so he sends his servant up to find a bride for Isaac, who's living in the place where his mother was, but also the place where Hagar went for refuge when she first fled, the first time she fled from the camp when Sarah was oppressing her. And Isaac's not doing anything about this family stuff. One would imagine he's still under some trauma. So Abraham takes matters into his own hands and sends his servant up and finds Rebecca, who seems very anxious to leave home and come to find this new husband of hers. And so it shows some concern that Abraham has for this son that he tried to kill. And God blesses Abraham in everything. And thus he finds Keturah and raises a whole new family, very much as Job does after he's lost everything. Right. Abraham's basically lost everything. His wife has died. Both his sons have disappeared from his life. So he tries to make sure Isaac has a life going forward as best he can. And then he finds this Keturah, and they have more children, just as Job, after he lost everything, was able to recreate his life. Well, so that's his good part.
Right, and you also mentioned flaws.
Flaws. Well, if we go back to last week's Parsha, right, and we look at the Akedah closely, at the very beginning of the Akedah, God actually speaks to Abraham, tells him to go do this thing. Afterwards, during the Akedah itself, during the near sacrifice, it's an angel, it's a malach, a messenger, that God sends to tell Abraham not to kill him.
Right.
And it's either the same messenger or a different one that tells Abraham that he'll be blessed and everything. And then, but we see that from the time God told Abraham to go do this, God never speaks to Abraham again. I believe it's because Abraham actually listened to God and didn't fight as he fought for Sodom and Gomorrah, and didn't fight as he didn't fight for Ishmael. I think part of the test was tshuva on Abraham's part, and so he didn't do that. And so we see the result of his, while he was loyal to God, the result of his flaws of not standing up for his own children. Here, he tries to make up for it in finding a bride for Isaac, but God never speaks to Abraham ever again. And we see, the only reconciliation we see is when the two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, come back together to bury Abraham in Machpelah in the cave. And I kind of always wondered, right? Maybe not always, maybe just the last several years. If they came back to bury him just to make sure he was dead, and he couldn't try and get rid of them one more time. But even without that, it's a very sad passage that the only time his children, his two first children, come together is to bury him. And that's a result of the choices he made in his life.
Right. Well, looking at this parsha and thinking about Rebecca, I always wonder if when Abraham is bringing her to be his son's bride, is he finding a soulmate for his son or for himself? Because on many counts, you could argue that Rebecca is more like Abraham than she is like Isaac. She's active, she's proactive, she's assertive. She's not the passive, quiet person that we see in Isaac.
Except when they parallel the story with Avimelech, where Isaac, Yitzchak, is assertive and Rebecca is passive. Isaac says, just like his father did, pretend you're my sister so they don't kill me. And Rebecca goes, okay, fine. That's my paraphrase. That's not the actual quote.
Right, yeah.
And with the same result. And you would think Avimelech would have learned by now not to trust these people. But I think I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but Rebecca's very much more like Abraham than she is Isaac.
Well, she's restless. You said she wanted to leave home, to escape.
She wanted home,
so like Abraham, she's moving from one place to the other, and then...
Absolutely. I agree fully. But I'm not sure that doesn't make them not soulmates. And Abraham didn't pick her. It was Eliezer. So he had some insight into what Isaac needed, evidently. And many of us, if not most of us, end up finding life partners who are like one of our parents or like the combination of our parents. And so from that perspective, it makes sense that Isaac would be taken with and wanting to commit with Rebecca, who was like her father, and with hints of her mother in it as well.
Thinking about all these four characters that play such role in our parsha, Abraham, Sarah, Rebecca, and Isaac, which of the four is more likable, is more, with which one of these is it easier for you to identify or to feel connection?
Good question. I would say none of them.
You just dislike all our forefathers.
No, I don't dislike them all. Which one do I feel connected to would be Eliezer.
Okay.
Right? Because that's very much a part of being a rabbi, is helping not necessarily make shidduchim in the sense of bringing people together to get married and to be coupled, but to make connections and help people find their path, and fulfill their needs in various ways, and that's what Eliezer does. He's tasked with this incredibly important duty, and I ask myself why, and it's because he's the only one who can do it. He's the only one with the insight and the foresight to see what Isaac would need. And I don't think I reach those same levels of insight and foresight, but at the same time, it's much more similar to what my life entails in terms of what my role as a rabbi is than that of Abraham or Isaac or Rebecca. And Sarah at this point is dead, so I don't feel connected to her at all. At this point, in the past, I have some feelings of connection. I feel connected to all of them in very many ways because they're very human, like I'm human. So it's hard for me to pick amongst one of them, but Eliezer stands out for me.
I'll ask you, but my last question is almost unfair. Would Sarah approve of Rebecca had she known her?
That's a great question. I don't think it's unfair. Here you go. If the rabbis and the Talmud and the Midrash were correct, and Sarah died because she thought Isaac was dead, if that's how she felt about Isaac, and we don't know because we never really hear about their interactions other than from a third perspective of her wanting to get rid of Ishmael and Hagar.
Right.
But then I think she would, because Rebecca was ultimately good for Isaac. And I think as a mother and as one who cared so deeply about her son, that his death would break her heart to the point where she died, then yeah, I think she would approve of Rebecca because Isaac was so happy.
Rabbi Rosenfeld, thank you so much and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.